Hello, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World Talks, where every word matters. The polling stations in Moldova have closed. On Sunday, Moldovans cast their votes in the second round of presidential election with incumbent pro-Western Maia Sandu facing off Russian-backed candidate Alexander Stoyanoglu. What awaits the country now? And to discuss it, we're joined by Stephen Nix, Senior Director for the Eurasia Region at the International Republican Institute. Good evening.
Thank you for having me.
So we're still awaiting there's something, 52% for Alexander Stoyanoglu. That's the first early results we heard from Moldova. 48%. Those are preliminary results, of course. 48% for Maia Sandu. A comment on that, please.
Well, it's very early in the evening, so the results will be coming in throughout the night. So it's difficult to assess much from these early findings, except that we expect what might be a very competitive election. We'll have to see what the rest of the vote looks like.
Nevertheless, already 79% of the votes have been counted, so that gives us a scale, and it is also somehow worrying for Maia Sandu because, well, given the first round of elections, she won with a huge margin over Alexander Stoyanoglu, didn't she?
Yes, she did, and this was despite the fact that there was a massive vote-buying scheme that was engineered by the Kremlin to try to defeat Maia Sandu and to defeat the EU referendum that was on the ballot. That effort failed, but nonetheless, we'll have to see what the results are and whether the Kremlin is continuing to try to buy votes in the second round, in this runoff.
Mm-hmm. Right, we know almost for sure that Kremlin was trying to buy votes in the Moldovan elections on a huge scale. But could you also tell us what else was Moscow trying to do to secure the pro-Russian candidate's victory in Moldova?
Sure. In addition to the vote-buying scheme, there were attempts on social media to discredit the Sandu government, discredit Maia Sandu personally. There were cyber attacks, a number of things that the Kremlin did to prevent this country towards moving towards Europe and to prevent the re-election of a pro-EU president in Maia Sandu. So a number of different methodologies were used, but we think that the vote buying was the largest operation that they launched because it's estimated that they may have bought as many as 200 to 300,000 votes, and that would be decisive in any election. Mm-hmm. I'll add, though, that even though we have early results in, the international vote is yet to be completely counted. And we all know that the diaspora vote is very, very important. There were 250,000 votes cast from the Moldovan diaspora in the first round. Right now, it looks like there's a minimum of 320,000 votes coming in this time. And the ballots in the States and Canada have not yet been counted. So in a close election, the diaspora vote could be dispositive of the outcome, could decide the outcome of this election.
But the question is, where does the Moldovan diaspora live? Because we know that Russians have organized some special flights for Moldovan immigrants to reach the embassies to cast their votes, well, obviously, for Alexander Stoyanoglu.
Yes, well, in the first round, the majority of those votes, the vast majority, came from EU countries. But yes, we have heard reports that the Kremlin is transporting people to various countries to vote: Turkey, Minsk, Baku, other areas. So again, this is another deliberate attempt by the Kremlin to affect the results of an election in another country. But we'll have to wait and see all of the diaspora votes before we can make a judgment.
Sure. Now, I'm wondering about a clear socio-demographic division between the voters of Maia Sandu and Alexander Stoyanoglu. Who's voting for Maia Sandu? I would assume that those are younger people, maybe living in big cities.
That's correct. Maia Sandu's political base rests largely in the capital, Chisinau, but also among young voters throughout the country. That's her political base. That's the base that she tried to turn out for this particular election. That's where her strength lies.
And what about Alexander Stoyanoglu?
In the northern parts, the Russian-speaking parts of the country, in the north, also Gagauzia. So yes, the socialist candidate will always rely on those areas for their base of support. So yes, two very disparate types of bases for these two candidates.
Mm-hmm. Now, you say that Stoyanoglu is a socialist candidate. Therefore, I'm wondering whether economy was one of the hottest topics of this presidential campaign in Moldova. Well, obviously, there's also war next door, but what about the state of economy of the country?
Well, the government has faced a number of challenges. As you pointed out, first, the war, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian refugees entering the country, and Moldova took them in and cared for them. Secondly, this energy is that Moldova wanted to wean itself off of Russian energy reliance, and it's done so, but at a great cost. Energy costs have been driven up, trying to care for the refugees. A number of other economic issues have arisen that the government has had to deal with. So yes, the incumbent government is always under pressure to perform economically. The Maya Sandu government has done its best to try to steer this government through these tough economic times, but that might result in some dissatisfaction in some circles because they have been in power for 4 years.
And this dissatisfaction, as you call it, is quite widespread across Moldova, and well, it would be tough for Maya Sandu to win the next parliamentary elections. Therefore, the future of the country on its pro-European path is in question. And now, given the early results, could this be the very end of European ambitions of Moldova?
No, I don't think so. First of all, there are legal remedies. If indeed the vote buying scheme continued in the runoff, it's important to note that the Constitutional Court of Moldova is required to affirm the results, to examine the results and affirm the results. So we'll have to wait the decision of the Constitutional Court. Secondly, I would point out the parliamentary elections, which are required to be held next year, are extremely important because that vote will decide who forms the government. So again, we're going to be set for another important election in Moldova. Moldovans will have another chance to decide whether they want their country to move further towards EU integration or not. But my feeling is, based on polling data that my institute does in Moldova, the majority of Moldovans do want to be part of the European Union. So I'm confident that in the parliamentary elections, they will continue in that trajectory.
Right. Alexander Stoyanoglu was trying to sell a narrative to the voters that he would somehow balance between the West and the East. Now, is this even possible in Moldova's situation?
I believe that that's the art of the impossible. Moldova has a choice: either continue on the path to Europe or regress and go back towards Moscow. Very clear cut. And again, based on polling data that my institute conducts, very confident that the Moldovan people will want their country to continue on a European trajectory.
Mm-hmm. Now, given such a scenario that Alexander Stoyanoglu indeed wins the second round of presidential elections in Moldova, what would be the immediate consequences for Ukraine, mainly?
Well, it's hard to judge because he's been all over the place. Stoyanoglu has said, we want to have good relations with everyone. Yes, we want to be part of the EU, but yes, we want to have good relations with Russia. And has said very, very little about the conflict in Ukraine, except that he's against war. So very difficult because he's never really defined his position on this. He's played a game of being as vague as possible when it comes to these foreign policy issues. So we really don't know what his true intentions are. But again, we'll wait and see what the results of the elections are, what the international vote says, and see who actually becomes president. If Maya Sandu is reelected, the trajectory is clear. If there's a different result, it's very unclear what will happen next in terms of Moldova's orientation.
Sure, but we know that Alexander Stoyanoglu had a financial backing from Igor Dodon, who's closely related to Russia, and I'm wondering whether Alexander Stoyanoglu, if he indeed wants to fulfill his promises, could turn his back on Moscow, who will help him at least to the second round of the election.
Sure. Again, it remains to be seen. We have to examine the final results. We have to see if there were dramatic vote buying schemes again in this second round, which will take a while to accumulate such evidence. And again, I'll repeat that the Constitutional Court is required to affirm the results. And if the court, by statute, determines that there were violations of the law, and certainly vote buying qualifies as a violation of the election law, that would result in changing the outcome of the elections, then the court has the power to void the presidential election results. And then the CEC would have to conduct another round of presidential elections.
And do you think that the results will be contested if Maya Sandu loses? I mean,
if the body of evidence exists on the vote buying scheme, and they can prove that before the Constitutional Court, then yes, I think that they would pursue that.
I obviously wanted to ask if Alexander Stoyanoglu wins, will the results be contested then?
We'll have to see. We'll have to see. It's hard to say right now. But again, if the proof is there of Kremlin interference and that interference affected the outcome of the election, then I would argue that that would not just enable, but would require the court to strike down these election results.
So we still have to wait these next few hours to learn the final results of the second round of the presidential elections in Moldova. Stephen Nix, Senior Director for the Eurasia Region at the International Republican Institute, was our guest this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you for watching, and of course, stay with us for more here on TVP World.